You are now watching M.O.D. Entertainment. Make sure you subscribe and check out the playlist.
I grew up hearing gunshots in the late night. Ghetto bird, police sirens as a mother cries. Just another victim of the Soundbrown genocide. Locals posted, locked and loaded, ready to take lives. And when they heard the chieflet, they would duck up out of sight. Like your car when the sundown, it was mission time. You had to stay alert, cause bullets always travel blind. We stayed posted, we stayed drinking, and we getting high. Marchando down the enemy's neighborhood as we ride. Put the hood, put the glica sample, fuck their side. No regrets, but the truth is no peace of mind.
G-File.
Now, starting off right here in Watts, we have another one of these more larger neighborhoods, but that's hardly ever talked about. You know what I mean? You have the Locotes Watts neighborhood. Now, in the area of Watts, you technically hear more about like Southside Watts. You hear about Grape Street Watts. You know what I mean? But Locotes is roughly, one of the more larger neighborhoods out of Watts. You know what I mean? They're Watts, Vargo, Locotes, or you see it sometimes just Locotes Watts. That's how they write it. And you can find this neighborhood. They're established right there in 112th Street. So by the hundreds, you know, like 110, 111, 112 is where you find the Locotes Watts neighborhood. You know what I mean? They already been right here for a cool minute. I was told that they were here since the late 70s, early 80s is when this neighborhood was established. Right there, you feel me? And like I said, it's one of the neighborhoods that you hardly hear about, but they are up. They do write a lot, give law enforcement a hard time, and you know, they go at it with several sets over there, you feel me? It's just that they're a very well-organized neighborhood. Really don't like putting their business all out there like that, you feel me? But yeah, this neighborhood is definitely with the business. They get it on and popping, you know what I mean? These guys is one of these sets not to be messed with, you know what I mean? Because like I said, they're one of the more larger neighborhoods out of Watts, you feel me? And yeah, that's how they maintain it, you know what I mean? They're still going strong, still representing right there, you know. You can still catch them up, you know, even with all the homies that they have gotten busted and all that. Seems like they, you know, they can't slow down this neighborhood because they still representing right there stronger than ever and putting their barrio up on the map, you know what I mean? But that's what's up with the Vargo Locotes Watts right there, holding it down for their side, you feel me? Shout out to the homie Grimy out of Locotes. Gracias, my boy. And shout out to all the homies from Locotes that be holding it down right there.
And here's another neighborhood that's been around since the 90s. You have the Suicidal Watts. Now, Suicidal Watts, or as written SCL, is how they write it. They're located right here in Watts as well. You feel me? They have several different locations where they, you know, roam around through. Seem to be going at it with a lot of neighborhoods right there. Watts seems like, you know, they don't have that many allies right there. They're roughly this neighborhood is roughly a small neighborhood as well. I was told that they're roughly only like about 50 members. So you don't see them up as much as you do with these other sets around here. But nonetheless, homie, the Suicidal Watts still have their riders and, you know, holding it down right there for theirs and still putting it on the map for them, you know. But that's what's up with the Suicidal Watts neighborhood right there.
Now, right here, we have the controversial neighborhood, which is the Fifth Hill Street Watts. They are the same ones that are located in downtown Los Angeles that I had covered already in the west. They have a branch over here also in Watts, was their second location. You know, they're spread out to several locations, but right here in Watts is you know, their second domain. They've been in Watts already since the 80s. This neighborhood has it goes back all the way to the late 60s, early 70s, so it's a pretty old school neighborhood. But right here in Watts, they have only been here since the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Where they established themselves, you feel me? Don't really have like a specific spot. They kind of just tend to drift around Watts, you know what I mean? Different homies living in different places or different locations to kick it at, and you know, all of that. And they used to be a large neighborhood, but they're not as large no more because how they're not Southsiders no more. They roll as Border Brothers, as Paisa. They run Paisa, so they're no longer Sureños. At least that's what I was told, you know what I mean? And that's how they write it out like that, you know what I mean? But yeah, like in general, they're a whole much larger neighborhood, but in each specific location, they're a lot more smaller now. But nonetheless, you still catch them around. You still see their hitters. You still, you see their presence, and they still be right there representing for theirs. You know what I mean? Even though they go at it with like everybody, because everybody's an enemy. You know what I mean? Because it's free game now and all that. They seem to, have, the manpower and seem to be holding their ground. You know what I mean? Only time will tell. But yeah, that's what's up with the Fifth Hill Street Watch right there, representing for their neighborhood and putting it on the map.
And right here we have the MTS neighborhood, not to be confused with Barrio Los Muertos. This one is MTS is known for modern town stoners. MTS is roughly a small neighborhood. You know what I mean? They never have been large. Due to the fact that they're not that old school. Have only been around since the late '90s, early 2000s is when this neighborhood was established. You know what I mean? So they're roughly smaller in size. I was told that they're roughly about 60 members. But nonetheless, even though there's 60 members, this is a real gang because, I hear people trying to say that it's not a real gang, but it is a real neighborhood. They do be right there representing in Watts, holding it down for theirs and putting theirs on the map. You feel me? Just because they may not be as large as some of these other hoods doesn't mean anything. They still hold it down. They still have the riders and representing right there.
Now, right here in Watts, you have the Hickory Street Watts. Now, the Hickory Street Watts is one of the more smaller neighborhoods out of Watts. You feel me? They're not that large. I was told that they're roughly less than 90 members. So like about 80-ish, like around there. They have always been like a more smaller, family-orientated neighborhood. You know what I mean? They're more like a family. You know what I mean? And you can find their neighborhood right there, located on Hickory and Wood Avenue. Is where their neighborhood's at. So by the 80th, like 88 and all of that, you know what I mean? Is where you find their playground. You know what I'm saying? Roughly a more smaller turf. That's why they've never been large in numbers. You know what I mean? Because there's not a lot of spacing over there. You know what I mean? So it makes recruitment a lot more difficult. But this neighborhood, nonetheless, they have the riders. You know what I mean? This neighborhood definitely has the riders. They're still right there functioning. You know what I mean? They still be holding it down for theirs. Just because they may not be as large as some of these other neighborhoods, and they're roughly one of the more smaller sets, doesn't mean anything. They will get it on and cracking. These guys ain't no slouches. And the Hickory Streets right there been holding it down since the 70s. So like I said, they're roughly a more older neighborhood, but they've never been large in size. You know what I mean? That's roughly why you don't see them up as much as like you do as these other Watts sets. But nonetheless, homie, you know what I mean? They got the representatives and the riders that be holding it down for their side and putting their neighborhood on the map. But that's what's up with the Watts neighborhood right there, Hickory Street, holding it down for theirs and representing.
Now here we have an interesting neighborhood. We have the DLW neighborhood, which stands for DS Lanes Watts. Now DS Lane Watts, it got the name from the crib set that's known as 10 Lanes Cribs, which is on 110th. So this neighborhood is also on 110th. They share neighborhood, and it seems like both neighborhoods seem to coexist. They get along fine. There's no animosity or beef between them. They have a really good relationship. You feel me? Sometimes even riding together. You know what I mean? But this one is the homeboys. Not to be confused with the 10 lane. TLCs is how they write it. This is the DLW, which is DS Lane Watts, the translation in Spanish. But yeah, they seem to share territory and seem to, get along with each other. So that's what's up with the DS Lane Watts. It's has only been around since the late 90s, early 2000s. I was told that it's roughly small, about 40 heads. So this one is, roughly one of these more smaller neighborhoods right here in Watts. But they have the riders right there representing it and holding it down for theirs. Now here you have the Village Boys. Now the Village Boys is a neighborhood that's already been right here in Watts since the 80s. It is one of the neighborhoods that's well known over here. They're not large, but they're not small, so they're just average sized neighborhood. Even though now they're not as deep as they were at one point, they still have their members and riders. You know what I mean? It's one of the neighborhoods that you do hear about when you think about Watts. You know, they're another neighborhood that comes into mind. Be holding it down right down 107th. The territory is roughly small, but nonetheless, homie, they hold it down. You know what I mean? These guys ain't no chumps, ain't no pushovers. Going at it with all the surrounding neighborhoods right there, especially Wild Boys. Seem like them and Wild Boys have some heavy beef between, their neighborhoods. But the Village Boys still be right here representing it, putting it down, and putting their vibe on the map. You know what I mean? Shout out to the homie Speedy and Spooky from Village Boys, and shout out to all the homies from Village Boys that be holding it down. Now, right here, we have one of the more interesting neighborhoods out of the Watts area. Um, you have the Vargo Nutwood Watts gang. Now, the Nutwood Watts gang is a neighborhood that's located on 111th Street. Now, this neighborhood right here is also known as the Nuez. The Watts Barrio Nuez gang is another way that you see it up. Now, this neighborhood right here, it's pretty old school neighborhood. You know what I mean? They're with the business, they be right there representing it and holding it down. Now, the reason why I say it's interesting is that there's also a neighborhood that's called Nutwood Cribs, you know what I mean? Which is located also in the same area. They share territory. This is one of those things that's kind of like what happened with Grape Street Watts, except this neighborhood, how could I say it wasn't one neighborhood when it started. What it was is that the Nutwood Cribs were around first, and then when the Hispanics, who lived in that area as well, banded together, they decided to call their barrio Nutwood as well. You know what I mean? So they just write Nutwood Watts 13, while the other ones write Nutwood Cribs. You know what I mean? So this is Nutwood Watts, so written NHW, has been around right here roughly since the late 80s, early 90s. And even though this neighborhood is not as old school as some of these other Watts neighborhood, they grew large, pretty fast. They're not big, they're not small, they're just, a decent sized neighborhood. But they spread rapidly. They came up the ranks, pretty quickly, because they do have their riders like Lazy, Creeps, Woody. Shout out to all the homies from Nutwood Watts that be holding it down right there. I know that they do have their riders, for their neighborhood. And they still be holding it down right there. It's still stronger than ever, and put in their vibe on the map. But that's what's up with the Nutwood Watts gang right there.